The Story.
Byron had been unwell for a little while and so had been through a series of checkups and that sort of thing. And the specialist diagnosed Byron within minutes really and said, you've got a cancer that is growing in your throat. And from there we found out that it was stage 4, inoperable. And so the journey began.
G'day, I'm Jimmy Colefax. Welcome to The Story. Well, today we're going to hear how pastors Byron and Anne Graham have gone through their share of health challenges in life, with Byron in particular having had several close calls with death. As a matter of fact, they got the bad news that Anne's mother was diagnosed with cancer. At the same time, Byron was in the hospital being treated for cancer. But through it all, God has been working in their lives and helping them to overcome. Byron and Anne are chatting with Shelley Scowen.
Tell us about the challenges that you faced in your family growing up.
Yes, well, it was a challenging upbringing in the sense that both of my parents were alcoholics, and tragically they died that way in age 55 and 52.
Wow.
So they died young of that disease. And growing up in that household, really poor, we just basically dragged ourselves up. And then, of course, you follow the same pattern, and it wasn't long at a young age I actually, got into the alcohol myself, and it grabbed a hold of my life.
So how did you get out of it then?
Well, it was when we found Jesus Christ. I wasn't even looking for God at all, but a mate of mine became a Christian. And, of course, he told me all about God, and I really wasn't interested. I was happy living that lifestyle. But I thought if I said that prayer, then I could get him off my back and tell him that it didn't work and it's good for him, but, I don't need it. And so one Saturday morning in my house, I just said, God, if you're real, you show me, and I'm in 100%. And within a very short period of time, a matter of days, the alcohol was just taken out of my body. I couldn't drink anymore. I could drink anything else but alcohol.
Wow.
And my body would convulse and vibrate, and the pain was so bad because I kept trying to drink because I didn't want to stop. But the pain was so bad that I ended up giving up, and I thought, well, there must be something in this Christian thing.
Wow. So I guess that's something that you recommend to other people then that are still on that journey towards Christ. You recommend for them to just call out to God and make himself real to them?
Absolutely. It worked for me. I would never have accepted Jesus Christ if he hadn't have demonstrated who he was. I mean, I'd seen religion. I'd seen the bad side of religion, and that wasn't attractive at all. But when I found Jesus Christ, I mean, when he touched my life so powerfully, how could I deny it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's verses in the Bible that say, draw near to God and he will draw near to you. Seek God and he will make himself known. So it literally is that simple. Hey, praying a prayer, and even the likes of, what you did was almost a bit of a skeptical thing. Hey, God, if you're out there, then prove yourself. And God did.
Yeah, well, I was just trying to get my friend off my back. He kept witnessing to me all the time and drove me crazy. I thought this will just get him off my back, but it turned out to actually be the linchpin that turned my whole life and family and generations around.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, here you are now serving as the senior pastor of a major church on the Gold Coast and have been doing so for over 20 years. At what point did you decide to go to Bible college then?
Well, I was only a believer for probably 8 months, and I think that next Sunday we woke up and I said to Anne, I think we're Christians now, we probably should find a church. And so we started that church journey, which was incredibly new to us. And I was sitting in a meeting one night. I was living in Western Australia, actually in Perth. We'd sold our house at Alexandra Hills and moved over to Perth. I was working over there earning big money up in Geraldton. And I flew back home to empty the house out. We'd sold it. And I sat at a meeting in a church service one Sunday night, and I actually heard an audible voice for the first time in my life. It shocked me, and it was simply the voice that said, "I want you to go to college." And I thought there was somebody else talking to me, or the preacher was talking to me, or someone, but it was actually the voice of God.
Wow. So it doesn't get a whole lot more clear than that. You knew that was definitely God's direction.
Yes, but it was a long time after that before I actually entered the ministry.
Really? Why is that?
Yeah.
Were you purposely running, or was it just kind of circumstance?
No, I didn't know a lot about it. I went to Bible college, but when I came out, I just knew that I wanted to do what God wanted. I just didn't want to do something and race ahead and do something and do it in my strength.
Yeah.
And so we were offered churches, Anne and I were offered churches throughout the state, to go and pastor them, but we just didn't feel God was in that. And so we just waited and waited. And I think God had a lot of work to do in my life to prepare me for that next stage.
Well, there you are, pastoring away, and it's obviously has been growing and growing and growing. But maybe, Anne, this is where you might be able to take over some of this story, because 2008 hit, and there was one day in particular that was pretty devastating for the whole family. But for you personally, it was a full-on day. Tell us about that one day.
Well, it was a day like no other. It was 2008, and Byron had been unwell for a little while, and so had been through a series of checkups and that sort of thing. Been in India, and rang me from India and just said, "Something's not right, and when I get back from India, I need to see somebody because there's clearly something going on in my throat." So I made an appointment. He flew in from India that same day, got off the plane, went straight to our GP. GP organised a specialist appointment the very next day. And really then the process started from there. The specialist decided that he would need a biopsy, and the specialist diagnosed Byron within minutes really and said, "You've got a cancer that is growing in your throat." And so a biopsy was organised, and from there we found out that it was stage 4 inoperable cancer growing in his throat. And so the journey began from there, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us more about this stage 4 then. If it's inoperable, are there still treatment options?
Well, there was, and the treatment option for Byron was chemotherapy, radiation, and we were warned that it was going to be of the most severe kind. The types of drugs that they wanted to use on him to save his life, we were told that were some of the most potent on the planet, and that some people did not survive the treatment, and so we knew that we were in for a really rough ride. We knew that our lives would be altered somewhat, and that day that he got the diagnosis, we got in the car, and it was, I don't think we said too much to each other driving away from the doctor's appointment. It was fairly silent in the car, really. I think you don't really know what to think, what to feel, what life is about to look like. You have no idea what the journey would bring to you. We just knew, in my head I was thinking, I need to call a family meeting, let all our kids know. We've got 3 children, son and 2 daughters. So that was on my mind, and then I knew that I would have to contact our church leadership team, our board, and which all of that was organised. And then I knew with Sunday approaching that we would tell the church. And so, the process began, not to mention the fact that we were getting ourselves ready for all of the hospital appointments, the doctor's appointments, and everything that comes with these massive times in somebody's life. We had no idea. I mean, we've both got an incredible amount of respect for people who go through these kinds of stories. It is a very big journey, and it's life-altering. But on the same day, Byron was ordered to have a biopsy done at one of our Gold Coast hospitals, and that was done on a Monday. And when they were wheeling him out of the operating room where they'd taken a biopsy, and the reason for that was to determine what type of cancer it was and what stage it was, and just as his gurney was going past me in the hospital corridor with him semi-conscious because they'd given him some mild sedatives to do a biopsy, my mobile phone rang, and it was my sister on the end of the phone telling me that our mother had been diagnosed with mouth, tongue, jaw and throat cancer at exactly the same time.
Wow.
And so I said to my sister, look, just give me a few minutes because I wanted to see where they were taking Byron and what room they were setting him up in. So I hung up to my sister, followed them down the corridor, watched to see what room he was going in, and they were getting him settled. And then I went downstairs to ring my sister to find out what was happening with our mother. So she was going through aggressive cancer as well. So she was in a Brisbane hospital, and Byron was in a Gold Coast hospital.
You're listening to The Story. Today, Shelley Scowen is chatting with pastors Byron and Anne Graham from the Gold Coast. And as we just heard, things were pretty full on for Anne, as within a day or two, she faced the very real possibility of losing both her husband and her mother to cancer. We'll find out what happens next when we return.